Good morning, Achoja Warriors. Another great day. Thankful for your time. Today, we dissect Michael Jordan in his business acumen. We often talk about the athlete, the sports figure, the 6 championships, the playing baseball, and this, that, and the other, but we rarely get to discuss just the business acumen. And I believe it's important as we're trying to figure out how do we create millionaires within our lives, within our communities, and why it's even important and why it is a goal worth striving for. I think it's important to start looking at successful millionaires and billionaires and see what we can glean, what patterns we can pick up. So Michael Jordan, as you guys are familiar, he's considered one of the greatest basketball players ever, the greatest on many people's lists, but he's definitely among the greatest, where people won't debate that. But when you talk about just the mindset, his ability to figure out how he's going to maximize his talent, I think you have to look at 3 things. Number one is you have to be able to have a plan, and then you have to be willing to adjust with it. And so Michael Jordan, he talks about his journey, his path, and how he, like anyone else, had difficulties with self-confidence. And he says that the moment he realized that maybe he was better than a lot of people thought, maybe he had the ability to do more than other people expected of him, he said was when he shot that corner 3 against Georgetown in the national championship game of college basketball, and he was able to, essentially seal that win for them. And he said that when that ball went in, he said he kind of looked and he thought to himself, maybe I have what it takes, right? Maybe I'm able to do exactly what I always set to do, what I know I have inside of me. But the doubt and the fears, maybe they're not as big as I thought they were. Maybe they're something that I can get by.
You've had a lot of fantastic moments in sports. What's the greatest moment?
I mean, what started everything? You
Don't say that. don't say the shot against Georgia.
Yeah, that was the greatest moment because I think that took me from if I had any doubts about playing on college level or playing with the big guys, that shot gave me the confidence that I belonged where I was, and that it was, if you put your mind to doing whatever you want to do, good things can happen, So before anything else happened with Michael Jordan outside of that game and against you guys, that shot gave me the idea that I could be better than what people think, and I can, surpass any expectations that I may have for myself.
So some of you may already know, or it may be news to you, but in the early 80s, the number 1 shoe brand was Adidas, where most basketball players had Adidas shoes. And then that was followed second by Converse, and then Nike was somewhere on the bottom where it was like very small percentage of people actually wore Nikes. Now, today, about 90% of basketball players wear Nike shoes. And whether this is about the 50-60% that wears Jordans or the other 30 that wears just Nike itself. And so when you're in the early 80s, Michael Jordan, he was someone who was wearing Adidas and he believed in brand loyalty. And he said that when he first was like, okay, I'm going to go be a professional basketball player. Now that I have this confidence, I know who I am, what I can bring to the table. He said, you know what I'm going to do? He said, I'm going to go reach out to Adidas. I'm going to see if I can figure out how to partner with Adidas for my shoe deal. And so he said that he was talking to his agent, and then they were trying to meet with Adidas, and they had some different discussions, but things just didn't really take off. And so then they set his second bar, where it's like, okay, let's go talk to Converse. Let's see what they're doing. And when he sat with them, that they basically said, or at least his dad had asked, what can you do differently for my son? And so they looked at him and they said, well, we don't really have much on the different, but we can do what we've done for the other amazing athletes we've already signed, which is about maybe $150,000 endorsement contract. And at that time, that was about what the athletes had earned. So this is not uncommon. It was showing the respect to Jordan that they've shown a lot of other professional basketball players, and they thought it was a good offer. And so with the way that they responded to Jordan's dad's question, Jordan knew that meant that it probably wasn't going to be Converse either, because that's just not right. The fact that your dad would even ask that question lets you know that that's something that's very important. And to say that we're going to do what we've always done is probably the wrong answer when you're facing that situation, but that's what they did. And now at this time, as I had mentioned, Nike was at the bottom of the barrel. We're talking about nobody was wearing Nikes. So when they called, Jordan was like, dude, I'm not even going to talk to them. Right, like that's not even on my things to do list. Nobody's wearing Nikes. Let's just keep it moving. And yet the agent was like, dude, we got to listen to all the offers, right? Like, come on now, let's not be crazy. And so he couldn't, it said Jordan's agent couldn't get Jordan to agree to come to the meeting. So he actually called Jordan's parents and was like, look, we need to get Jordan in on the meeting, right? We got to show just some decent respect of being there in person. And so it said that he ended up going, and then as they had the conversations, Nike had went all out. They were like, look, okay, we got to become, top of the league, and how are we going to do this? Let's bank on Jordan, right? They did their own calculations. At this time, everybody basically said, you're going to give the big man, the centers, the shoe deals. Everybody kind of likes that feeling of walking around dunking and different things like that. So we're like, okay, well, let's go to the big man. Let's go with the centers. Everybody's really tall. Everybody's doing their thing. And Nike was like, okay, well, what else can we do? We have to do something slightly different to change our projection. And so when they targeted Jordan, they went all in. They had the shoe design for him. They offered him stock options. Like, they gave him a very lucrative contract. And they went all in on Jordan. And Jordan was like, okay, this is really good. And he ultimately took that deal and then took it to Adidas to give him one last shot, one last chance. And they said that Adidas was very interested in that. They were going to match it, but they took it all the way up to the very, top of Adidas. And they decided to turn down Jordan and said that he was too short. Now, by too short, in case you're wondering, he's 6'6". But they were under the impression the way things have been is the way things are going, and shoe sales are driven by the very tall person, people that are pushing like that 7-foot range. So we're just going to pass on Jordan. Pass on Jordan. I know what you're thinking, but that's what happened. So Jordan, while things may not have been exactly as he wanted, he understood the importance of adjusting. So even though he wasn't sold on Nike, even though he wasn't super excited about them, by the time he had gathered all the necessary information, he was able to make an intelligent decision, and he signed with Nike.
You never succeed without that possibility of failure. I mean, each time that I do something, I can either win or I can lose. And if that inner confidence that you got to have to take that chance.
Now, Nike, understanding that they went all in on someone that has not played one professional basketball game, what they ended up deciding to do is they were like, okay, let's put like 3 provisions into your contract. We're just going to make sure that if for some reason you don't pan out, that we're not on the hook for all the stock options and all that other stuff. Like, let's give us the ability to kind of nix this contract after 3 years where we don't need to go the full 5. And so Jordan said, sure. And the 3 things that they asked of him, they said, one is you would need to win Rookie of the Year. If you win Rookie of the Year, then you're good to go. This contract is going to keep going. Number 2 is he averages over 20 points a game. And they said you have the first 3 years to average 20 points a game for an entire season. And number 3 is that you make an all-star team. They said if you make an all-star team one of your first 3 years, then we're good. Contract's going to rock out, no problems at all. And so, in case you're wondering, his first year, he hit all 3 of them. Jordan averaged 28 points a game. He won the Rookie of the Year, and he was able to go to his first All-Star game. And Nike at that time knew that they had made the right selection. Now, on Jordan's end, because he had transformed the way that negotiating was done, he actually was able to get the stock options. And you know what he actually made that first year? He made about $7 million. Or at least within that 5-year contract, I believe, where he made $7 million from that first contract. Now we're talking about a time where you were getting paid about $100,000 a year. He got $7 million from that.
Maybe it's my fault. Maybe I led you to believe it was easy when it wasn't. Maybe I made you think my highlights started at the free throw line and not in the gym. Maybe I made you think that every shot I took was a game winner. That my game was built on flash and not fire. Maybe it's my fault that you didn't see that failure gave me strength, that my pain was my motivation. Maybe I led you to believe that basketball was a God-given gift and not something I worked for every single day of my life. Maybe I destroyed the game. Or maybe you're just making excuses.
And because of the stock options, as the Jordan brand grew, the way I would look at it is think of it almost like he's getting a royalty, where someone like, for example, we often joke like the guy for AOL who did the "You've Got Mail" voice. He didn't get a royalty. So what I mean is he didn't get a check every single time somebody opened their email address and it said "You've got mail." Instead, he got paid to do it one time and then they reproduced it over and over again. And that was closer to how a lot of these arrangements were. You were not getting the endorsement deals that you see today. And so Jordan, understanding the value that he was bringing, his dad letting him know and kind of guiding him, that's like, look, we're looking for something different because we know what we have to offer. So he was able to come up with a very lucrative deal. And then you see that that's actually more commonplace. And so now Jordan grows into a $2 billion company, and this leads you into the second one. Jordan said the second thing is he always talks a lot about fear. And he says that, look, man, I have the fear of failure. I have the fear of a lot of things that each of you are struggling with. But it's very important that you do not allow your fear to keep you from trying.
What it did teach me was don't be afraid to try. The worst thing that can happen is it doesn't pan out the way that you envision it. But at least you know that by giving it a shot.
He said that you may be able to talk about my mistakes. He said you may be able to talk about my misses, but he said you won't say that I never tried. And so Jordan, once he kind of grew his company and he retires, right? He's got a $2 billion company. He makes about $90 to $100 million a year from Nike alone. Just because he was able to get something that allowed him to have that passive income, as we always talking about achieving, where he's getting this reoccurring revenue of this multi-billion-dollar company. He's getting his $100 million each year. And if you think if he had sold his likeness, his licensing, where it was just some simple deal, then he wouldn't have been able to capitalize the way that he has, because it's still a large difference even between the fact that Jordan is the brand is worth $2 billion versus him still getting $100 million. But imagine if he was only getting a few $100,000 or something of that. Right? Like, you really have to understand your overall value, and you have to be willing to bet on yourself. You got to be willing to take the risk. You cannot allow the fear of going in a path that is not as common to cause you to not take any steps whatsoever. You got to try. And Jordan says that he allows his very competitive spirit, his very competitive nature to push him into trying new things, into becoming better. Because Jordan said, look, if other people are going to do it, there's just no reason that I can't. So then Jordan, now that he's got his brand, now it becomes a decision of how do you multiply your money. You often find that the studies say that when you're looking at millionaires and different people like that, that they often have 3 to 5 minimum streams of income. That you're going to find the majority of millionaires have multiple streams of income. So now Jordan started off by focusing on his brand, and that brand revolved around basketball, where he worked on his craft endlessly.
He runs his corporate empire from high atop Chicago, the city that made him famous.
Could you have imagined when you first started playing that one day you'd be sitting up here running a company that's worth $500 million?
No. I never really thought about it. All I thought about was doing what I was good at and letting that open up a lot of opportunities for me and choosing from that point on.
Nobody was outworking him. It really was just that simple. Even when he took off the couple years to play baseball, they said that he was the first one in and the last one out, as he was trying to give it all he had, because he knew that it would require a lot for him to be able to get to the level that he needed to get to. And he lives by the mantra that you won't say I didn't try. And I think it's just a powerful place to be, because if you're going to try something new, if you're going to change the trajectory of your life, then you got to step out on a limb and take some risk. And Jordan understood that, and he was willing to put in the work to get there. And then that closes us off with the third one, which is you have to be able to put in the work. That's a part of it. But you really also have to be focused on, how do I multiply? How do I diversify the income that I'm getting? Right, because a lot of people would have said, oh, if you're getting like $90 million a year from Nike, well, that's great. What is there to worry about? But you often find that if you're striving towards something, I often compare it to being a track athlete. If you run track, then you know you're not ever running against the people next to you. You're running against your own personal best, that you're running against the clock, as they would say. Because in track, it has little to do in some instances with the people that are on that particular track with you, because everybody's running on their own track across the world, so they just take the fastest times. And what that means for you is you may be first in your meet, and you just may be in a meet with a bunch of slow people. And then you end up maybe like 10th, but you let off the gas because you thought, I'm good, I won this one. And so track is often a reminder that you're racing against your own personal best. And Jordan understood that more than anyone. He did not allow what other people were doing to impact the product that he was putting out. And that if anything, he would use that as fuel to do more. He would never use it as an excuse to do less. And you find often that people allow the difficulties of the world and society as a whole to keep them from even trying, from even doing anything. And then you're not going to be able to just settle and feel complete, right? Like, I don't want to oversell it, but it's little to do with the money, right? That is the byproduct. But the goal is we're striving towards this balance, this ideal person that we know deep inside is within us that we can bring out. And so Jordan did not allow the fact that he was very successful by many people's standards. Studies show that less than 2% of blacks actually are millionaires by the time they're 65. Less than 2%. Knowing how much money passes through the community. So Jordan could have been like, I'm good. Like, I'm good. Life is great. I'm not worried about anything. Like, I'm going to be fine. But instead, he was like, okay, where can I diversify from here? So he started buying dealerships, started buying restaurants, and he started trying to learn about mergers and acquisitions and how to grow his money through businesses. And then he ended up being able to buy a minority share within the Charlotte Bobcats. And then he was able to work his way up to majority owner. In 2015, I believe it said that he owns 90% of the Charlotte basketball team, and that is where a lot of his wealth, that's what put him in the billionaire status. Because at the time, I believe it said he bought it for about like 120, about 100, about I think 137 million is what he had paid when he bought the majority share within the Charlotte basketball team. And then he was able to grow up from there, where the company or the team is now well over $1 billion. And you're going to have to make those similar decisions, right? Like, a lot of the strategies that we're going to work up, that we're going to figure out, they're driven around the idea that you are going to generate income. You're going to build wealth, that you're going to build a legacy. But the question of when you stop, well, that's different for each of us. Well, for me, it's not a question of when you stop earning money. For me, it's a question of when you stop learning. Because as you learn, as you provide more value, you're going to generate more income. You're going to generate more wealth, right? Like, that's just the way that things operate. So it's a question of when are you going to stop learning? When are you going to stop growing? When are you going to stop pursuing? Because if you sit, well, sure, whatever you've built, that's probably going to take care of you for the rest of your life if we plan it out right. But it doesn't mean that you were done. It just means that you stopped. And a lot of us have different goals where we want to travel, we want to do different things, we want to help with this charity and this causes. And I think all of those are great. As long as you're still pursuing something, then I think you're okay. But I have found that more often than not, as you continue to provide value for people, organizations, that ends up turning into dollars for you. That's just what I found. I'm not saying it's an absolute, because there is certain structures within an economy that inhibit certain avenues. But I will say that a lot of the times I find that if you were able to go back to that first one where you make the adjustment, I find often that you may have been able to build something within the first 5, 6, 7, even 10 years, and then you may have capped that stream out, where then you have to make a shift.
As you leave the game, what message do you want to leave to young athletes that are coming on?
Be true to the game, because the game will be true to you. If you try to shortcut the game, then the game's going to shortcut you. If you put forth the effort, good things will be bestowed upon you. That's truly about the game. And in some ways, that's about life too.
Until next time, continue blessings on your journey to become the champion of your dream life. And as always, better self, better wealth.